Anyone who welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. Greetings, friends. This is Jim Orbe for Pathways of Hope. Today is the 25th Sunday in Ordinary Time, and our Gospel reading is from Mark chapter 9, verses 30 to 37. This is the part of a bigger segment in the whole chapter where Jesus gives instruction to his apostles on discipleship, putting others first. Here, once again, we learn that to be Jesus's follower is to think and care for the needs of others first than our own, especially for those who are oppressed, lacking in the basic necessities of life, those who are considered least in value in the eyes of people, those who are marginalized and in the fringes of society. Isn't it the case, even from our own experience, that many people strive to be always first, to be thinking of serving our own interests first before others? Well, Jesus demonstrates to his apostles that to be first, you need to be last. To be the greatest, you need to be the servant of all. There is a complete reversal on how we think from the way Jesus thinks. The readings from last Sunday talk about this, as we read from the previous chapter when Jesus rebuked Peter because the way he thinks is not God's way, but man's. Jesus then said, if anyone wants to be a follower of mine, let him renounce himself and take up his cross and follow me. For anyone who wants to save his life will lose it, but anyone who loses his life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. At first, the disciples understand neither the necessity of the Messiah's death. They expect a political liberator, nor the idea of the resurrection of an individual. For they expect only that the resurrection of mankind only happens at the last judgment. Yet, they understand enough of what Jesus is saying that they do not want to know more. So they are afraid to ask him. Don't we have a similar experience when we don't want to ask and know the answer because we are afraid of the implication of the consequence that will surely affect our life? Or perhaps the disciples remember of Peter's earlier attempt to express disapproval of Jesus' prediction of suffering and led to a harsh rebuke. And when Jesus asked his disciples when they arrived from their travel, what were they arguing about on the road? This does not display his ignorance, but rather triggers the following lesson on discipleship. They said nothing because they had been arguing which of them was the greatest. They kept silent because they were ashamed. The reading from the letter of James is a very good description of this reality. James said, wherever you find jealousy and ambition, you find disharmony and wicked things of every being done, whereas the wisdom that comes down from above is essentially something pure. It also makes for peace and is kindly and considerate. It is full of compassion and shows itself by doing good, nor is there any trace of partiality or hypocrisy in it. Peacemakers, when they work for peace, sow the seeds which will bear fruit in holiness. Then James further said, where do these wars and battles between yourselves first start? Isn't it precisely in the desires fighting inside your own selves. You want something and you haven't got it, so you are prepared to kill. You have an ambition that you cannot satisfy, so you fight to get your way by force. Why you don't have what you want is because you don't pray for it. When you do pray and don't get it, it is because you have not prayed properly. You have prayed for something to indulge your own desires. So Jesus sat down, called the 12 to him, and said, "If anyone wants to be first, he must make himself last of all and servant of all." He then took a little child, set him in front of them, put his arms around him, and said to them, "Anyone who welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And anyone who welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." The question they asked is, who was the greatest? In connection with their messianic expectation of a political liberator, the disciples dream of status, honor, and power along the lines of the previous experience of those people who led a revolt against the Roman Empire. So, as often as in the time of Jesus, when teachers teach, he sat down in order to teach them a valuable lesson that just as the Messiah of God leads by suffering, each disciple is to lead, be first by becoming a servant of all. The suffering of Jesus not only marks the beginning of the messianic rule of God, but characterizes patterns of conduct such as humility, faith, and love that are required in the kingdom. Well, friends, may the Lord grant us the grace to seek God's will first in our life and the courage to follow Him. May He give us the grace to be like children who, in humility, depend on the providence of the Father. God bless you all.